Hey guys, what's up? It's Alex here. Welcome back to another video here on YouTube, and this is certainly a video I've wanted to create for a long time. This video is going to be speaking about what I think the F1 2020 calendar should look like. Now, I'm not going to be doing anything revolutionary in this. I'm not going to be suggesting that we bring back tracks like the Nordschleife to Formula 1, as whilst it might be cool, I don't think it's particularly viable. This one is going to be looking at tracks that should or could realistically come back to the calendar. More specifically, tracks that were in Formula 1 over the last 5 years. So in this video, I've taken away 3 or 4 Grand Prix and replaced them with ones I think that could suitably do so. Of course, let me know in the comment section down below whether you agree with my suggestions here and whether you take out any further Grand Prix. Of course, leave your 21 in the comment section down below, but try and be realistic, because let's be perfectly honest, as I said already, we're not going to be seeing certain Grand Prix come back to the calendar. Something like the old Hockenheim isn't going to be coming back in a hurry. So let's get into this, my 21 race calendar for the 2020 season. Okay, I know it's not going to happen, but at least it's creating a discussion here. So, first race on the calendar. It's typical by now that it's the Australian Grand Prix. Now, definitely not the best racetrack for modern Formula 1 cars, but I guess by many people, including myself, it is now seen as the opener for each Formula 1 season. And for that reason, really, I'm going to say it should stay. Now, I definitely feel we need to have a Grand Prix in either Australia or New Zealand, as there is a huge fan base of Formula 1 fans over there, and I think people that dedicate themselves to the sport as much as those guys deserve to have a Grand Prix. But is there a track that could suitably replace Melbourne? Maybe you're better to answer that question than I am, because I'm not from New Zealand or Australia and know little about the tracks. Now, I watch V8 Supercars, I do watch the Toyota Racing Series from New Zealand, and so I know the tracks here and there, but none of them particularly suit Formula 1 cars from what I can see. But saying that, Formula 1 cars have raced around these venues in the past, so let me know what your thoughts are on that one in the comment section is down below. As I said, somebody from one of those nations probably can give a better opinion on that. So I still think the Australian Grand Prix should stay, and Melbourne seems to be the most suitable one, but the second Grand Prix on this list has got to be the Bahrain Grand Prix. Now, over the last couple of years, it has held some of the more interesting and memorable Grand Prix. Especially if we look back at the 2019 season so far, I would say, at least, it's probably been the most exciting Grand Prix. I think it's honestly one of the better Tilke designed Formula 1 tracks, and I want it to stay on the Formula 1 calendar. Now, I think Formula 1 and Bahrain, of course, has a bit of a controversial past, but nonetheless, the Grand Prix racing around this track is normally quite interesting. It's one that benefits to thanks of the DRS in the recent couple of years, but still, it does provide good racing. And in my opinion, as I said, is a pretty interesting track. So I think the Bahrain Grand Prix should stay. I mean, the politics and all that sort of stuff is not what I really focus on in terms of this list right now, but maybe it's something that needs to be accounted for in the wider picture. But nonetheless, the Bahrain Grand Prix over the last 5 or 10 years has generally provided some interesting races, and therefore I'm going to leave it on my ideal 21 race calendar for the 2020 race season. So I've slightly mixed up the order here. Now, I'm leaving it in the order I say I think it could go out as, but maybe it doesn't quite work out. The Azerbaijan Grand Prix, Baku. Now, we look back at the 4 years we've had of this Grand Prix so far, it's either been a thriller or downright boring. So this track definitely splits the opinion of many. It's a decent track and one that requires quite a lot of driver skill to come out on top. We've seen many driver errors over the last couple of years, and finding the limit certainly does challenge the greatest drivers in the world. But nonetheless, it isn't exactly a thriller. Every single time we go there, we're wondering what's going to happen this year. And as I said already, sometimes it does disappoint. But nonetheless, I do feel we need this track on the calendar. I think it's definitely been a welcome addition. It's not like we've had 4 Grand Prix here and they've all been boring. We've had 2 really good Grand Prix here. Yes, the drama definitely plays into it, but nonetheless, they're still interesting. This year's Grand Prix wasn't great, but at least we've had 2 Grand Prix there out of the 4 that we'll certainly remember for a very long time. So for the 4th Grand Prix on my list of 21, I've put the Russian Grand Prix. Not the best track for modern Formula 1 cars, but it does allow for some closer racing than others. By no means is it the perfect track, but you could say it has a bit more charm than some of the other Tilkodromes, especially the challenging second DRS zone on the back straight, as braking into that chicane after that often provides some action. I definitely remember in the junior Formula over the last couple of years, quite a few drivers locking up into there, some even crashing out of the race. Formula 1 drivers, of course, on a slightly different level, meaning less accidents do happen there, but I think the challenge of coming off the DRS flat out into a very tricky set of corners does sometimes provide some interesting racing. But nonetheless, as I've said already, the Russian Grand Prix, I think it should stay. It's not the best Grand Prix track for these cars, but in general, it does provide some okay racing, and I can't be taking off every Grand Prix I don't think is 100%, otherwise this list would be down to 5 or 6. Saying that, we go on to number 5, and that's the Spanish Grand Prix. Now, I was not too sure about this track, as the lack of action over the last couple of years has somewhat dulled the sport going back here, and it's been widely rumoured that this could be taken off the calendar for the 2020 season. It could even happen over the next couple of months, who knows. However, we've got to look back due to the fact that I do feel we need a mix of new and older tracks on the calendar. That's part of the reason why I've left it in. Of course, it definitely has some of the history in Formula 1 right there. And of course, a lot of the teams test here, or all of the teams should be testing here at the start of every season. So a lot of teams have the data and the knowledge from this track, and therefore it probably should stay for that reason as well. The teams know what it's about. It's definitely towards the bottom of my list, but it sneaks in due to its heritage of the Spanish Grand Prix. And I think the fact that we've had so many we've had a great Spanish driver in Formula 1 over the last couple of years, and we've got Carlos Sainz in Formula 1 right now doing great things in that McLaren. I think we do need a Spanish Grand Prix because the Spanish contingent of fans is definitely seen all around the world, not just at the Spanish Grand Prix. So I think this one definitely should stay. Number 6 on my list is the Dutch Grand Prix, and with Verstappen coming into Formula 1 and bringing hundreds of thousands of new fans with him, I think this Grand Prix was always inevitable. I'm very excited to see how Zandvoort fares as a Grand Prix track, and I think that because of the massive Dutch fans that follow Verstappen worldwide, they do deserve that home Grand Prix as well. The track is a massive challenge and drivers will be tested to their limit, even though there will be undoubtedly a couple of changes around this track to suit Formula 1. Overtaking is definitely going to be at a premium, so qualifying laps will be mega. You might be seeing some drivers making some big mistakes on the Saturday when trying to find that limit. I went to this Grand Prix venue last year, I should say, when I went to the DTM. I thought it was a fantastic spectacle. I loved watching the DTM and Formula 3 and other cars go around this track. Whilst the overtaking wasn't really there, even in those cars, I still loved just watching the cars go around the track because it's something different. And if you haven't been to this track, maybe I'd recommend going here before they inevitably do a lot of changes before Formula 1 comes in. Bigger catch fencing, all that sort of stuff is definitely going to be needed for Formula 1, as you need to make sure the fans are protected from the danger of Formula 1. But nonetheless, if you can get to Zandvoort over the next couple of months, I definitely advise so, because they might definitely be changing a few things over the winter break. So the Monaco Grand Prix is my number 7 here. Now, modern Formula 1 cars definitely don't suit Monaco, and every single year this Grand Prix venue comes around, people complain. It's always been hard to overtake, and modern Formula 1 cars make it almost impossible for that to be the case. This was pretty much proven by the fact that Verstappen could not overtake Hamilton, even though he was probably 2 seconds a lap faster. It has to stay really because of its heritage, but I would never really choose it today if it was a new Formula 1 track trying to be on the calendar. In my opinion, it doesn't really add too much in terms of the actual spectacle of the sport. If you took away this Grand Prix track out of Monaco and for say put it, in the middle of London, I don't think it has any sort of spectacle. I don't think it's very interesting. The only reason it works is because it's Monaco, and the spectacle around it is just so massive. So for that reason, it has to stay. The heritage, and I guess the glamour of winning this Grand Prix will always probably mean this stays on the calendar. Maybe we get to a stage where the Monaco Grand Prix is too small for Formula 1 cars as they keep getting wider and wider. I doubt it's going to get to that stage, but we definitely want to see the next generation of Formula 1 cars have a chance of overtaking around Monaco, because over the last couple of years we've had cars that are definitely quicker following cars that are wounded, basically not be able to get past. You could say the deserving winner not winning said Grand Prix. But in Ricciardo's case in 2018, I think we're all pretty happy he did win that Grand Prix. On to number 8, the Canadian Grand Prix. Personally, one of my favourite tracks on the calendar. It wasn't a fantastic race this year, but it was definitely one of the better ones in the 2019 season. Maybe that's not saying too much though. It's a challenging street circuit that can actually provide some overtaking and some closer battles. I can't really see it being a track replaced for many years, especially with Stroll in Formula 1. You know, his dad might be ensuring that it stays on the calendar. And we also have Nicholas Latifi doing very well in Formula 2, probably making his way into Formula 1 over the next couple of years. Him and Stroll in Formula 1, even if they aren't right at the front of the grid, will probably ensure this Canadian Grand Prix stays on the calendar for a number of years. But nonetheless, that's not just because of the money or whatever that comes along with it. I genuinely think this is a fantastic track. And it's, as I said, a street track, but certainly a very challenging one, but does give the chance for some overtakes. So the Canadian Grand Prix, in my opinion, has to stay. So number 9 on my list is the Austrian Grand Prix. You may notice I might have just missed out a certain French Grand Prix, but I think I'll talk about this one at the end of the video. But I don't think it needs much explaining. So number 9 on my list, as I said, the Austrian Grand Prix. I really enjoy this track, and I'm sure it's a favourite for many of the drivers as well. In the pre-race press conference for the Austrian Grand Prix in 2019, many of the drivers all elaborating on the fact they do enjoy driving around this circuit. It's maybe not the best, once again, for the most modern era of Formula 1 cars, as they're so wide and this track is a bit of a tight and twisty one, meaning that overtaking is still at a premium. But saying that, there are multiple overtaking opportunities, even if the drivers might not be able to always make it work. The DRS zones are placed in, I'd say, decent areas to give that chance of overtaking, unlike some of the other tracks that I've left off this list so far. But the country, the energy drink company that owns the track, many things come together, meaning this is probably going to be staying on the calendar for at least as long as Red Bull are in Formula 1. But I hope it continues, even if they do decide to leave in the next 5 years. Number 10 on my list is the British Grand Prix. While it looks like one of the world's most famous circuits could be left off the calendar for 2020, I would definitely be still including it in mine. Even though many will see it as a dull circuit in comparison to the likes of other UK tracks like Donington Park, Oulton Park, Brands Hatch, who have really undulating, interesting corners, it's only realistically ever going to be held at Silverstone right now, the Formula 1 in the UK, because the tracks I mentioned, plus all of the other ones I go around the country to see, just wouldn't work as Formula 1 tracks. And Silverstone, it doesn't provide terrible racing. It's not the best. It's a bit of a dull circuit in my opinion. It's very flat and a little bit boring. Not much imagination with some of the corners. But then again, you know, the spectacle of Maggots and Beckett's, for example, is a joy to behold as a fan. So I think it would be silly if it was left off the calendar, especially when Lewis Hamilton is in Formula 1. You've got the emerging talents, you know, you've got people like Lando Norris and George Russell. They look like they're going to be winning championships in the next 5 or 10 years, and it would be sad for them not to have a home Grand Prix. But then again, you know, big champions in the past haven't had home Grand Prix, and it hasn't really affected them to go on and have success. But I think especially whilst Lewis Hamilton is Formula 1, I think it would be silly for them to knock it off the calendar, even if the financial situation is really that bad. But that's the thing, you know, you need to bring money to Formula 1. They need to see a reason to have you on the calendar, and if that's not the case with Silverstone, we may be losing this track, which would be a massive shame for all of the British Formula 1 fans. As Lewis Hamilton says, the best fans in the world. Next up on my list is the German Grand Prix at number 11. So like with the British Grand Prix, it is one that we could lose from the calendar due to financial reasons. While I am a fan of the Nürburgring for slower cars, I don't really see it working as a good Grand Prix track for modern Formula 1 cars. I personally think we should stick to the Hockenheimring for the German Grand Prix, but because of the ongoing financial situations with both the British and German Grand Prix, we may be seeing these Grand Prix replaced. and added on top of with more Tilke-dromes in the next couple of years. Whilst I've already mentioned, not all of those Tilke design tracks are bad, the majority of them lack the character that tracks like Silverstone, in areas, and especially Hockenheim, have. So I think it would be a massive shame to have them both knocked off the calendar for those reasons. What are your thoughts on this? What would you do? Is there a way to save the British and German Grand Prix? Of course, two of the greatest drivers in our sports right now, Vettel and Hamilton, with these two Grand Prix, if they are both lost. I don't know how they would feel, but personally, I think it would be a massive shame. Hockenheim, personally one of my favourite tracks, but obviously that's only my opinion. Number 12 on my list is the Hungarian Grand Prix. Now, you may remember, I was a little bit critical of this track in the past, but it is certainly a challenging track for drivers. In my opinion, once again, it is still not one of my favourite tracks, but I definitely think it should stay on the Formula 1 calendar. It was a bit of a mistake on my part to say that it deserved to go, when in reality there are tracks on our calendar that are providing a lot less challenges. A bit like the Dutch Grand Prix, a real challenge where drivers are going at the limit and trying to go above it to try and find that ultimate goal, which is points, pole position, whatever you're aiming for. And especially when drivers are going over their limits, there are normally big consequences. Of course, we've already spoken about the Dutch Grand Prix. Going off the track there is going to be a scary one. Hungarian Grand Prix, not quite as bad because there is runoff area, but it is like a street circuit, so very hard to overtake, and the challenges when going for overtakes are pretty clear. Number 13 on my list is the Belgian Grand Prix. Spa is an all-time classic, and it seems to provide interesting races, well, no matter what style of Formula 1 car you put there. I think that's a testament to say how good this track is, and the reason I believe this should be in Formula 1's tracks for a number of years. In my opinion, it should be a permanent place on Formula 1 calendars forever. Whilst that's probably not going to happen, I mean, it's inevitable that at some point it's going to be knocked off the calendar for some other track for some reason. But in the modern era of Formula 1, why on earth would you replace the Belgian Grand Prix? So many classic corners, so many classic races around this track. It would be a disaster for it to be left off the calendar. Number 14, the Italian Grand Prix. It relates like Spa for many reasons. One of the most famous tracks in the world, provides great racing, but I think due to its unique nature, it also allows some very unique results. Sorry, I said unique quite a bit there. But nonetheless, we remember back to 2008, Toro Rosso won a race. Sauber legitimately beat Ferraris on pure pace back in 2012. You know, I could go on, but it does throw up a few surprises, this track, and I think it would be a massive shame for it to be lost as well. I think it's a track that allows some of the back-end teams to have a possibility, whether that be on a podium or points. It just gives that slight different nature. It's nearly an oval track. It's the closest Formula 1 gets to IndyCar ovals. But nonetheless, I see both here and Spa are some fantastic tracks that I would hate to be removed from the Formula 1 calendar. And I hope the big bosses up there see sense and make sure that both of those Grand Prix at least are staying on our calendars for a very long time. Number 15 on my list, the Singapore Grand Prix. And like it or not, this has become one of Formula 1's most famous races. It's got the glitz of glamour of Monaco, and it's also being held at night. It does not provide the best of racing due to it being a tight and twisty street circuit, but I think the glitz and the glamour somewhat rival, if not beat, Monaco. And I think being under the lights definitely does make it special. So it's a bit weird considering my displeasure towards some other tracks, but I do genuinely enjoy watching Grand Prix around Singapore because it's just something different. It provides drama from time to time, and I think we should continue with it. And once again, I think we do need some more Asian Grand Prix, whether that means taking off some European Grand Prix tracks, which I would disagree with, or whether it would go to maybe 23 or 24 races. I personally feel like we should have more Grand Prix venues in Asia. I think it's an expanding market we should maybe capture in terms of Formula 1. And I think, we've got to keep Singapore for that reason as well. Number 16 on my list, another Asian track, which is the Japanese Grand Prix. Suzuka is another classic of Formula 1. It's one that doesn't particularly suit the wide and long modern Formula 1 car, but nonetheless, I do enjoy seeing cars and drivers right on their edge, and Suzuka provides this in bucket loads. But the lack of overtaking opportunities does dent this Grand Prix reputation in these modern Formula 1 cars. You know, I watched Grand Prix for 5 or 10 years now, and I struggle to remember a really, really classic race. Maybe that's just me, but I still don't remember really iconic moments from this Grand Prix in terms of, great wheel-to-wheel battles. I think that's much more down to the car rather than the venue, because I think you look back to the early 2000s, late 90s, and maybe even before that, there was action all over the place. So maybe that's another thing. Just change those cars to suit the tracks. Number 17 on my list is the Malaysian Grand Prix. So, it's weird, this one has recently departed from the Formula 1 calendar, but I think it is a shame, because I enjoyed watching all of the races, and I personally feel that it provided a lot more than tracks like France, for example. The track would often gift us with some tricky conditions and surprise results. You remember back to 2012? I'd like Formula 1 to go back here, but I don't know whether it's really working out financially for them right now for it to happen, but you think about all these crazy Grand Prix, the crazy downpour, or was it 2009? 2012, Sergio Perez nearly winning a Grand Prix in a Sauber. Eventually, winning that race was Fernando Alonso in a terrible Ferrari. Crazy things happened at the Malaysian Grand Prix, obviously partly thanks to the weather, but nonetheless, it's a memorable one, and I think it's a massive shame that it was taken off the Formula 1 calendar, so I wish in some way it comes back. Number 18 on my list is a completely new entry. I've put the Asian Grand Prix. So this has been rumoured for a while, but I think it's something that Formula 1 should seriously consider doing, because it would open up the market even more considerably. So we could use the Chinese Grand Prix track, we could also use the Indian Grand Prix track and the Korean Grand Prix track. We could alternate them every 3 years. So I know none of these three tracks are seen as particularly fantastic, but I think we need to open up the tracks that we visit, go back to some of the ones we have been to over the last couple of years, just so that more people around the world can see Grand Prix racing. I think we honestly need to do this a little bit more, have a European Grand Prix that visits 3 different venues every 3 years and rotates. That would be fantastic in my opinion. I haven't put that in my list, but maybe it's something that Formula 1 should seriously consider. Whether it would really work financially for some of these circuits which would need a Grand Prix every year. Maybe somewhere like Monza needs a Grand Prix every year to make sure they're financially set. But I would love this to be the case, and maybe it would allow some of the places in China or Korea or India, maybe some more of the club level events to be built up a little bit more and get an even better venue. Let me know your thoughts on anything. I think this would be a little bit different, if nothing else. So we come on to the final 3 for the Formula 1 calendar, my dream Formula 1 calendar for 2020. Realistic, we should say, it's not my complete dream. Number 19 was the United States Grand Prix. Sadly, it looks like the Mexican Grand Prix will no longer be on the calendar going forward, so hence the reason I've left it off my list, as I feel the United States Grand Prix has provided some nice moments over the past couple of years, especially seeing Kimi Räikkönen getting his first win in many years. While that was nice, I'm not a massive fan of this Formula 1 track, but fingers crossed 2019 will change my mind. Hopefully, by the second half of the season, we'll start getting on a roll of better races, because the first third of the season hasn't exactly lived up to expectations. But as I said, United States Grand Prix track at Austin, I don't think it's an alright classic, but it does provide some interesting features. You've got the cars on the edge in the first sector, going left, right. It is entertaining to watch. And there is certainly some challenges in there that you don't see on some of the other tracks, so it probably should stay. Number 20 on my list is the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Under the lights, it has led to some of the more interesting races over the last couple of years. I think it is one that is one of the better designed Tilke tracks, but I don't think it should be the Formula 1 season finale. I know there's a lot of money, money's been pumped in all around the place to make sure that it is the finale of the Formula 1 season, but at the same time, Brazil, Interlagos, yeah, that needs to be the finale. So leading on to my last on the calendar, guess what it is. Grand Prix number 21, the Brazilian Grand Prix. Why is this Grand Prix not the last one on the calendar? Interlagos should be always the season finale in Formula 1 in my opinion. Think back to the dramatic finales you've had in just the last couple of years. Okay, maybe looking a bit further than that. 2007, that was very dramatic. 2008, that was very dramatic. 2012, fantastic as well. I think that's because the track just gives us these crazy circumstances that can get thrown up, and the weather sometimes plays a factor in there as well. Abu Dhabi is definitely a spectacle, but I don't think the racing will ever be quite as good as Interlagos. And like I was saying, I think the first race needs to be great, and I think the last race needs to be great. So maybe we need to see some restructuring in Formula 1's calendars to make that the case. Australia has sort of been the start of the season for the last couple of years. We've normally started there, but it doesn't mean that we need to keep starting there going into the future. I know once again they might be throwing a bit of money at Formula 1 to make sure they are the first of the season, but nonetheless, I would like to see something else maybe take over the first race of the season role, especially if Formula 1 stays at Albert Park. We need Formula 1 to start off with a dramatic swing to get fans engaged for the rest of the season. So overall, I know Formula 1 is going to new venues and trying to expand the brand and get new fans around the world, but at the same time, I am a fan of some of these older tracks. Some of the new ones do give the current spec Formula 1 car more places to overtake, but some of these classic tracks do just give something a little bit special. I'm hoping tracks like Vietnam will provide interesting racing, but I'm not holding up too much hope because all of the previews I've been seeing of this Vietnam track look like it's going to be a Valencia 2.0, a very, very hard track to overtake and one that doesn't particularly provide great racing. Tracks like Paul Ricard are also absent from my list as I'm just not a fan of tracks that give you so much margin for error. We saw it at the most recent Grand Prix. Multiple occasions drivers were just going off the track, making mistakes, and they got away with it scot-free. Paul Ricard is a testing circuit. That's what it's for. It's not really supposed to be a Grand Prix venue. I want France to have a French Grand Prix. I mean, everyone in the world wants to have an own Grand Prix, but it needs to be a track that's suitable. Paul Ricard just doesn't provide good racing. I think we just all have to admit this right now. I'd like to see it go elsewhere. Mangicourt maybe wasn't a fantastic Grand Prix in terms of overtaking, but it did provide some drama and there were some interesting corners in there. It just has a bit more character than Paul Ricard. You know, you look at some of the examples, Ricciardo going off the track. He wouldn't have gone off the track there if there was a wall there, but you know, he overtook it off the track and got a penalty because of it. People were spinning, as I said, off the track. If there was a wall there, you know, they'd have damaged their car and paid for their mistake. Nonetheless, I'll move on. Let me know your realistic 21 race championship down in the comment section down below. If you disagree with any of my thoughts, please let me know. I'm always interested to know your opinions. But please be respectful. I'm not saying I dislike a certain Grand Prix for any other reason, bar I don't think the racing is particularly great or it doesn't provide a great spectacle. I'm not saying anything against any of the countries that are holding those Grand Prix. It's literally just about the Grand Prix racing in this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give me a like if you enjoyed it and subscribe if you're new to my channel. I really want to continue doing more videos like this. Long form content is definitely where I'm at right now. I really want to keep going with this sort of stuff, and with university finished right now, I really want to dedicate more time to my channel, even though I do have 2 part-time jobs which make up to 6 days a week. Quite a lot of action for me right now. I seem to be non-stop. I haven't had a day off in 3 weeks. But that's just the way I like it. Don't get me wrong. I love work and just dedicating myself to something. Nonetheless, thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you around soon. 3 or 4 days, fingers crossed, another video will be up on the channel. See you again soon. Enjoy the Grand Prix this weekend. It's been Alex, I'm out here. Goodbye.